Greetings everyone. Today we're going to explore literal equations. So the first thing is to make sure you have the right set of notes. If you don't have them, these are pretty easy to write on your own notebook paper. Remember throughout this video, if you need to pause, if you need to make notes or star things that you want to talk about, just make sure to really own your notes. Let's start off with a definition. A literal equation is just an equation that has two or more variables. So in our class, so far we have been dealing with one variable, and now we're going to add more variables. Super quick review of the inverse operations. What's the opposite of adding? What's the opposite of subtracting? What's the opposite of multiplying? And what's the opposite of division? And so we're just remembering those operations. And then can you add one more thing to your notes? If we go back to our solving on the side of your paper, side of your notes, can you just recall these 5 solving steps? Because we're still going to think through these, okay? We still want to undo these operations. Now take a look at this notation. This does look a little different. So here's what we have, right? Our goal is to solve for the variable in parentheses. If you need to add that, solve for the variable in parentheses. Right? So I'm saying, hey, I want you to get A by itself. So go highlight or maybe make the A bold or a color. And so we want to take the same approach. Draw a line down the equal sign. Pretend the A is an X for a moment, right? If I said, hey, solve for X, what do you got to kick to the other side of the line? What do you need to get rid of? Well, that B is there. So instead of a positive B or an add B, let's minus B. Okay, opposites cancel. A falls down. That's nothing new. What's new is we're still left with a mess on the other side, right? Can I subtract a B from a C? Nope. And so you write it as you read it. C subtract B. The goal is the A needs to be a loner. I mean, there could be all kinds of analogies you could make in this, right? The A needs to quarantine. So get everything away from the A, right? Get it to the other side of the equals, the other side of the wall. Whatever you need to do to isolate that variable, that's your goal today. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Draw your line. I promise you these lines make a difference. Acknowledge which letter you're solving for. Highlight it, bold it, whatever you need to do. If I look at that letter, it has to stay put. But currently it says minus E. Well, that doesn't belong there, so let's jump over the equal sign using an inverse operation of addition. Now I can't actually add them, so I write it as I would read it. F plus E. I am done because D is by itself on the left side. All right, let's take a look at these ones. Now, does anyone know what that equation is for? This is the circumference of a circle. Can you add that word there? Can you, oops, sorry, I don't know why my pen's doing that. Can you add circumference? You're going to use that in the next couple years here, so that's a good formula to know. So draw a line. Which letter are we looking at? We're looking at just the R, right? Just the R. Okay, now I want you to write this just to acknowledge something. There are dots in between here, right? Or you could think of it like this. This could be thought of as 2 pi times R. Do you see how that means the same thing? All right, if my goal is to keep the R by itself instead of times 2 pi, what are we going to do? Divide both sides by 2 pi. See how I kicked it over? So times and divide are opposites. They cancel. And then the left side, it stays messy. We have to get comfortable with messy. R's by itself. We're good. All right, take a look at this next one. Do you know what that formula is for? You might have learned this in physical science. I'm going to leave that one up to you to label if you haven't figured it out already. I need to concentrate on the math of it. The math of it is I want to get m by itself. Okay. Well, if I draw my line, it says a big divide v, so what's the opposite? Times v. Opposites cancel. D times v. We did it. We got m by itself in one quick move. All right, we've actually used this formula already this year. We did this with perimeter of a rectangle. And I'm going to say, it could be a rectangle, a square. It could even be the perimeter of a parallelogram. So we got some options there. But the math of it says we want to get W by itself. Okay, concentrate on the W, highlight it, mark it, whatever you need to do. So first of all, we've got this chunk of information here. It says plus 2L. We can keep the 2L together. Instead of plus 2L, what's the opposite of positive? Minus 2L. Right? Instead of adding 2L, we're going to minus 2L. Okay, opposites cancel. This is a mess. Write it as you'd read it. P subtract 2L. Drop down what you didn't use. Now be careful. Okay, make sure that L looks like an L and not an I, please. All right, our last step, this says times 2. So let's divide everything by 2. Now I can't actually divide 2, so I'm going to write it as I would read it. There we go. W is by itself, so we are good to go. All right, do you recognize this geometry equation? Area of a triangle. Area of a triangle. Half the base times the height. But in math right now, for isolating, for rearranging, right? You guys let's look at that left example for a moment though. See how everything has the same letters and numbers, right? We just rearranged it. We rearranged. That's what isolating is. That's what solving is. That's what literal equations do. We just are rearranging. Okay? And so my goal on this one is to rearrange so that B is by itself. All right, mathematically, I know it's a fraction. We got to deal with it. So if I take a look, this says, let's make it easier. Make it easier on you guys. This says divide by 2. So what could we do instead of divide by 2? That's right. We could times by 2. That gets me a 2a. And then divide 2 times 2 changes, and a 1bh falls down. You see how we did that? Okay. So then if I'm still trying to get b by itself, does that 1 matter? No, you're right. That 1 doesn't matter anymore because times 1 divide 1, like it's the same thing. So let's just write bh, right? That means the same thing. So I'm trying to solve for b. When 2 letters are next to each other, what does that imply? That implies multiplication, right? And so instead of ab times h, we're going to divide by h. Opposites cancel. B falls down. And we have 2a over h. Okay. Now a couple of other options. We say sometimes you might have heard instead of dividing by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal. But I am also okay if you split it up into dividing and then multiplying. All right, think of that as a fraction bar. So that's just another option. All right, let's take a look at this one. My goal is L. So let's look at where L is. L is right here. And I'm going to draw my line down the equal sign. If you haven't been doing that, it's going to be tough to stay organized. So draw that line. Now I have this big plus stuff. And we need to undo any addition or subtraction first. So we're going to minus. Think of that like one piece of information, right? This is one chunk of information. And so I'm going to move it all at the same time. You can do that. It's a chunk of information that's being added, so we're going to subtract it. Don't let the fact that it's pies and squares throw you off. That doesn't matter. And then write it like you read it. S subtract pi r squared. I'm still trying to get L by itself. Well, technically, what's between these? A dot. A dot. So we're going to say, oops, I shouldn't have made that green though. I should have made that yellow. Instead of a times r pi, what's the opposite? Divide pi r. What I do to one, I do to all. L falls down. And this is messy, and that's okay. It's okay to have a big fraction bar mess. That's all right. We got to get used to that, okay? Now, I mentioned at the beginning writing your solving shortcut. So if you get stuck, think about this. We moved some variables. How do we move them? By adding or subtracting. And then we undid any multiplication or division. Okay? It's the same steps. They're just chunks of information. All right, let's try this one. Draw our line. We're solving for W. Now, just like before, pretend these were all numbers, right? Let me show you what I mean for a moment. You don't have to write this down, okay? But let's say I gave you this equation, 5 equals x minus 7 over 2, right? See how it looks the same? We would times by 2. It's just now it's a letter, okay? It's the same steps as equations. It's just messy answers. So instead of a big divide m, we're going to times m. Cross off the opposites. Drop down what you don't use. We're concentrating on the W. The W has subtracting stuff. I'm just going to say stuff. So instead of subtracting stuff, we're going to add stuff. That's a chunk of information, so keep it together. Write it as you read it. S times M plus 10E. We isolated W. Now for this one, this is going to be like our first task in our Algebra 1 class. So if you are in my room, star this one. Our goal is to isolate y, and we're going to do this so much, okay? No distributing, no combining. Let's move a variable. Instead of a positive 2x, we're going to minus 2x. The difference is I can't actually subtract it, so I write it as I'd read it. That says 10 minus 2x. Drop down. Instead of times 5, we're going to divide 5. Divide 5. Now, here's what I want you to try. Can you back up for a moment? I want to try this. Instead of a big fraction bar, can we divide everything? If I divide everything, do you see how this looks? 10 divided by 5 is 2. Subtraction sign. And then this says 2/5. Oops. Sorry, my pen got scratchy there. 2/5, because it doesn't divide, right? And it doesn't reduce. And so we're going to practice that a little bit. We're going to practice dividing every piece as well. All right, let's try that one more time. Draw a line. Our goal is to solve for y. Okay, undo any addition or subtraction first. Instead of a negative 12, let's add 12. 5x plus 12. Can't actually add them, right? So we just write it as we read it. Instead of times negative 3, now here's where I want you to practice. Divide every piece by negative 3. Now, 5/3 does not divide. Leave it. But 12/3 does. 12 divided by -3 is +4. Excuse me, -4. Sorry, I was busy erasing. I forgot. -4. So solving for y is a concentration in Algebra 1 because we're going to do it so much. But you have to be comfortable with moving all letters and numbers around. Let's take a look at this one. Now my first thought is parentheses distribute. Remember our steps? Let's do it. Let's distribute this into the parenthesis. That means I have a 4mx plus 4my. Okay. Step 2, combine. Oh, I can't combine those. Those are different letters. Skip. Move variables. Yep, my y has to stay though. So I'm going to move, instead of positive 4mx, minus 4mx. Okay. This falls down. W minus 4mx. All right. There's no adding or subtracting, but there is multiplying or dividing. And so we're going to undo any multiplication or division, okay? So instead of dot 4m, because we're leaving the m alone, excuse me, we're leaving the y alone, instead of dot 4m, we're going to divide 4m. Now this is crazy letters, right? So we're just going to do a big 4m. Be careful. If you're dividing all, please make sure you have a big bar. Don't leave any room for interpretation. So guess what? Distribute and combining can still sometimes happen. All right, let's take a look at this one. Our goal is to solve for y. Whoa, y is on the bottom. Like, let's draw our line. But put a star by this problem because I'm going to have you reference this in your notes when you're in class with me. This one is confusing. And so I don't like that it's in the bottom. If you don't like what's in the bottom, get rid of it. I'm going to just rearrange. I'm going to bounce back and forth. Instead of a big divide by 2y, because I don't like it, I'm going to multiply by 2y. -7.2y. Oh wait, I can actually multiply those. That's -14y. Right? I just moved it to the other side. So now let's look at the y. Did that make it easier, right? Like you can rearrange things to put them in an order you like first. Okay? So now, whoa, that looks so much easier. Instead of times -14, let's do a quick divide by -14. We now have y equals x over -14. So the reason why I had you star this, if the variable you want is in the bottom, make it so there's no bottom, right? Multiply all that bottom, all of that denominator to the other side first, then see what you can do. So I understand that this is challenging because of the different letters, but in the end, remember, we are still only performing these operations. It's just that when we do our solving, we have messes. We have to get comfortable with messes and change your mindset, right? All we're doing is rearranging. All we're doing is rearranging stuff. And that is such a key concept for all of the algebras. You need to be comfortable with rearranging. Seek out other videos, other examples, Sabre Center support. Do what you need to do to master the standard. And until next time, have a good one.